What they were saying was utter nonsense. Caleb had almost forgotten the typical demeanor of the collectors after dealing with old Bill's antics for so long. Grim and Silas certainly wouldn't think to help him cover up anything. He remembered how old Bill had reaped a soul right in front of a crowd. Caleb quickly interjected, suggesting their work must be exhausting. He was implying that fatigue was making them delirious. His agent, Dana, shot them a look of pity, thinking about how many people in the entertainment industry develop psychological issues from work-related stress. Silas scoffed, remarking on how tiring it was and pointing out how few jobs Caleb had handled all year. Dana immediately defended him, insisting that Caleb was incredibly diligent and in high demand. If Caleb's guess was correct, Silas was referring to his part-time occupation. It was true. For a long while, Caleb had been avoiding that job, his workload far below that of his peers. He agreed with a sigh that it wasn't easy for him either. As the car entered the city proper, Grim announced they were getting out. He pulled several tarnished silver dollars from his coat, intending to pay for the ride. To Dana, they looked like rare collector's coins. To Caleb and Julian, they were clearly marked with a chilling, otherworldly energy. It was just like in those old ghost stories, where you pick up a spectral hitchhiker and the money they give you turns to dust by morning. Caleb firmly refused the payment, asking if he looked like he needed their money. Dana chimed in with her agreement. She reflected that while Caleb usually seemed modest and even frugal at times, he was now displaying a flash of the magnanimity expected of a top-tier celebrity. Perhaps it was her own bias, but she found his tone charming rather than arrogant. These two unknown guys, on the other hand, offering money like that felt insulting. Silas peered over, then suggested that if Caleb was so well off, he should give them some money instead. The strangest part was that Caleb actually complied. He rummaged through his backpack and produced a thick envelope, passing it over Grim to Silas. Silas weighed it in his hand, a hint of surprise in his voice. Grim pushed Silas out of the car. Caleb rolled down the window, telling them to be careful with their work and to keep it up. The two collectors' job was to apprehend malevolent spirits. The fact they had left their quarterly review in such a hurry meant they were on an urgent assignment. The two figures gave a faint nod and then seemed to dissolve into the night air. Dana was still speechless. She couldn't believe he'd actually given them money. Caleb chuckled, explaining that of course he hadn't. He pointed out that no one carries that much cash anymore and that the envelope was just filled with some high-end Swiss chocolates. Dana let out a breath, saying he had scared her. It was only then that a delayed sense of unease crept over her. She mentioned that for two handsome men, they had a strangely chilling presence, and she swore the temperature in the car dropped the moment they got in. Caleb casually suggested that her car's air conditioning probably needed a checkup. Dana hesitantly agreed. After consulting with his team and preparing the necessary materials, Caleb went to audition for the role of Brother Marcus, with Julian accompanying him. The director, a Mr. Vance, was a veteran of numerous acclaimed dramas and films, his reputation even more established than Julian's father's. He had a stern, commanding presence. In the preceding days, Caleb had immersed himself in the character of Brother Marcus, learning he was part of a contemplative spiritual order. He and Julian had a crash course on the topic, and Caleb drew inspiration from his encounters with a real-life ascetic, Brother Thomas. His audition left Mr. Vance visibly impressed. Vance had reviewed countless audition tapes. When it came to Brother Marcus, most actors veered into a kind of artsy, melancholic territory, each trying to be more profound and somber than the last, but none could convey a sense of true inner wisdom. A few had done their homework on theology, yet something was still missing. When the producer had suggested inviting Caleb to audition, Vance had been skeptical. He saw no need to chase popularity for such a pivotal role. Caleb's most famous part, the antagonist Sterling, had been masterfully done. He was brilliant at playing villains, but that image was a far cry from a devout spiritual guide. He worried that even with Caleb's acting prowess, the audience might be pulled out of the story. It was a valid concern. Many great actors become trapped by their most iconic roles. The producer had then shown him a photograph of a revered spiritual leader, a man known as the abbot, bowing slightly to Caleb, who was returning the gesture. A monk and a layman. Yet there was no conflict in the image, only a serene, almost mative quality. That was what made Vance reconsider and extend the invitation. Now, seeing Caleb's performance, he found it unexpectedly closer to his own vision for the character than anyone else's. Caleb seemed to embody the quiet dignity of a true seeker. Vance immediately had him read a second, more difficult scene. After watching both, he was deeply satisfied and asked Caleb if he had any formal spiritual training. Caleb answered honestly that he had just done some intensive research over the past few days. Although it was a last-minute cram session with Julian, his interactions with Brother Thomas had shown him that this particular spiritual path wasn't about esoteric mysteries. It could be raw and direct, focused on cutting through illusion to reach the core of human experience. Most importantly, Caleb felt that the smooth river stone Brother Thomas had given him was providing some kind of inspiration. Holding it while reading the script or listening to Julian's explanations, his understanding seemed to deepen exponentially. The stone, after all, had been a tool the old ascetic used to help guide his own students. Vance nodded, unable to make a final decision on the spot for a main character in such an ensemble film, but he had one more question. He asked if Caleb, should he get the part, would insist on bringing his own writer to the set. It was a common practice for A-list actors to have their personal writers on hand to alter scripts or add scenes. Caleb was about to say he wasn't nearly that influential yet when his eyes fell on Julian, who was there to support him. A small laugh escaped Caleb's lips. He realized the serious-faced director had just made a joke. Vance smiled as well. He had known of Julian for years, though they weren't close. He thanked Caleb for coming and said the final decision would be communicated to his agency. Caleb expressed his gratitude for the opportunity, stating that just being considered was a huge honor, and shook Vance's hand. He knew that collaborating with exceptional directors was a significant growth opportunity for any actor. His previous work with Julian's father and another renowned director had been immensely beneficial. An actor shapes a character and gives it a soul, but it is the director who orchestrates the entire story. After the audition, Caleb was busy with moving. He was leaving the apartment he had rented for years to move in with Julian. His neighbor, another up-and-coming actor named Sean, was sad to see him go. Though their busy schedules meant they saw less of each other, Sean had always felt a profound sense of security, knowing such a powerful presence lived next door. Caleb hired a moving company. He didn't have many possessions, and since he wasn't bringing any furniture, everything fit into a single truck. The modern, multi-story house Julian had purchased in the Hollywood Hills had been renovated a couple of years ago but never lived in. At the time, a major supernatural disturbance in the city had caused his soul to become unstable, disrupting his daily life. The delay, however, turned out to be a blessing, as it now allowed him to live with Caleb. The house featured a clean, contemporary design with 3 floors above ground and a basement level, complete with front and backyards. A flowering dogwood tree stood in a corner of the front yard, a remnant from the original landscaping, but like the lawn, it had been neglected for some time. The moment they arrived, Vixen, in her fox form, began rolling ecstatically on the overgrown grass. Basil, the serpent, eyed the large oak tree with satisfaction. Ermine, the stoat, gently brushed against a corner wall, tears of joy welling in his tiny eyes. It wasn't a historic manor, but it was wonderfully spacious. Caleb, wearing a face mask that concealed his identity from the movers, carried a cardboard box in his arms. One of the workers, seeing the new home, offered some friendly advice, suggesting they burn some sage and smudge every room to clear out any negative energy. Caleb glanced at the food bowls in his box and his frolicking familiars and was momentarily speechless. He thanked the man for the suggestion. Drive out spirits? With this crew, the place was more likely to become a beacon for them. Julian directed the movers to take Caleb's belongings to the master bedroom. He surveyed the scene with deep satisfaction. After seeing the workers off, he walked over and wrapped his arms around Caleb, who was watching their new home and the happy creatures with a soft expression. The domesticity of the moment was perfect. They were a happy family. He imagined them in the future, after the trees and flowers were pruned, sitting on the grass on a sunny day. They could read together, or he could work while Caleb studied a script, perhaps allowing Vixen to give Caleb a gentle paw massage. Caleb looked up. He remarked that the front yard was quite large and wondered if they should dig up the lawn to plant a vegetable garden. Caleb's parents loved growing herbs and scallions on their balcony. It seemed a waste not to use such a large plot of land for something productive. Before Julian could respond, Vixen shrieked. She protested that she was going to live there. If he planted vegetables, she would be sleeping next to fertilizer. Familiars, especially fox spirits, were exceptionally clean. Those who kept them knew not to splash dirty water in the yard, or at least to pour it low to the ground, lest they accidentally soil a familiar and incur its wrath. Caleb apologized, admitting he had forgotten, and dropped the idea. Julian took a deep breath and suggested they could use the backyard for a garden, leaving the front for the familiars. The oak tree could serve as Basil's perch. A small custom-built den for Vixen could be placed in another corner, and Ermin could have a luxurious, velvet-lined enclosure in the basement storage room. Dana video called Caleb to see his new address. She saw Julian in the background and managed a strained smile, not daring to comment. She just praised the house, calling it big and beautiful, and asked if they were thinking about getting a dog for security. Caleb glanced at Vixen, who had finished her sprints and was now happily digging at the ground with her hind paws. He replied that he didn't think it was necessary. They had a good security system. Dana had only asked in passing and quickly moved on to discuss other work matters. It was a tradition to leave all the lights on in a new house for the first night and to use the stove. Julian cooked a meal, and afterward, he held Caleb on the plush sofa as they watched the news, feeling relaxed and comfortable. Caleb was practically nestled in Julian's arms, feeling himself sink into the soft cushions, a pleasant drowsiness washing over him. Vixen, having just re-cleaned the entire house to her own exacting standards, plopped down on the sofa and announced to Julian that she had counted 4 bedrooms, so he would no longer have to sleep on the cramped window seat. Julian just acknowledged her with a simple "oh." Vixen then scampered off to wrestle with Basil over a smartphone. Caleb raised a hand to cover his face. Julian gently pulled it away, cupped his face, and placed a soft kiss on his lips. He asked what Caleb was smiling about. Caleb murmured that it was nothing, just a happy thought. He glanced at the familiars on the other side of the room. It was noisy, yes, but no longer cramped. And the upstairs would be even quieter. It was, he decided, quite cozy. Across the room, Basil suddenly rose up, his lower body transforming into a serpent's tail as he held the phone high out of reach. Vixen, unable to grab it, eyed the wall, calculating the angle for a ricochet jump. Basil swatted her away with his tail, telling her not to bother him while he was reading. The fox spirit yelped, demanding he give it back because it was time for her to vote in an online poll. Basil finally handed over the cracked, outdated phone, his eyes still glued to the screen. He was looking at a fan forum and suddenly asked what julep meant. Vixen, however, was too preoccupied to answer him. Basil turned to Caleb and Julian and repeated his question. Caleb hesitated. Basil pressed on, saying he saw people commenting that it was very sweet and he wanted to see what it was. Seeing Basil's earnest curiosity, Caleb couldn't bring himself to explain. Joking about it was one thing, but actively promoting his own real-personship felt strange. So he started to act. He stood up abruptly. Where did Basil go? He was just here. Caleb's expression of confusion was so genuine that Basil himself was momentarily bewildered. He hadn't been on the receiving end of Caleb's elaborate deceptions before and had no defense against it. He even answered seriously, saying he was right there and asking what was wrong. Caleb feigned shock and distress. Have I lost my powers? Oh God, I can't see him. He grabbed Julian's arm. What about you? Can you still see him? Julian played along. That's strange. I can't see him either. It was so bizarre. Basil was completely baffled, but Caleb's performance was so convincing. A perfect portrayal of someone who had suddenly lost all their supernatural abilities. He even pulled Julian along, saying they had to go upstairs and try drawing a sigil to see if their powers were truly gone. Basil sat on the floor below, waiting for 10 minutes. Vixen, finished with her business, returned the phone to him. She heard him muttering seriously to himself about why they hadn't come back down and how he couldn't figure out why their spiritual senses would suddenly vanish. What a fool. But it wasn't his fault. Caleb was a ridiculously good actor. Vixen's eyes glinted, and she rubbed her paws together. She told Basil she could explain why, and she would also tell him what julep meant. He wanted something sweet, didn't he? A fan is a fan, and she was about to recruit Basil into the fold. Basil looked at her skeptically, saying she had better not be trying to trick him. Serpent spirits were notoriously suspicious, especially when dealing with fox spirits. Vixen scoffed, asking what she would gain by tricking him. She explained that the July was from Julian, and the IB was from Caleb. Basil corrected her that his name wasn't ranked 13th in any significant way. She was saying julep referred to the two of them? Exactly, Vixen confirmed. That was why they got embarrassed and went upstairs. She hopped onto the dining table, crossing her legs in a storytelling pose. Basil, however, seemed uninterested. What was their story? They were just a normal couple. Since he had known them, they had mostly just teamed up to fight things. He consciously tried to avoid watching them together. Besides, all they did was whisper and share quick kisses. No different from any other couple. For Basil, a sweet story needed more than just sweetness. It needed drama. High stakes and emotional turmoil were what truly captivated a serpent spirit's heart. As for their gender, Basil hadn't even considered it. Homosexuality is common in the animal kingdom, so for animal spirits it was a non-issue. So when he said they were a normal couple, he meant it. There was nothing unusual about them at all. He hadn't even thought about the potential difficulties they might face as a same-sex couple. In a word, they were bland. Vixen clicked her tongue. That was because he didn't know the backstory. To appreciate the sweetness, you needed a foundation. She asked which version he wanted to hear, the mortal world version or the supernatural version. The mortal version was what the public saw, the brilliant screenwriter and his actor muse. The supernatural version incorporated the hidden truths of their other lives. While Vixen hadn't been with Caleb from the very beginning and didn't know every detail, she had pieced together enough from various sources. Overhearing another fox spirit's ramblings about Julian thinking Caleb had died and losing the will to live, and bits of information from other supernatural beings. She had enough material to construct a compelling narrative. Basil, deciding he might as well listen, told her to tell him both. All right then, let's start with the mortal version. Vixen began to recount, with great dramatic flair, the story of Julep as it was told online, a narrative pieced together by fans that she just had to repeat. As he sat on the cool tile floor listening, Basil's expression slowly changed. He shifted his position. There was something to this. It was a classic brooding genius falls for the rising star story. Vixen, using her own knowledge and embellishing fan theories, amplified certain details, like how a character in one of Julian's scripts had no romantic storyline until Caleb was cast. Basil found himself grabbing a bowl of snacks. Okay, this is good. Next came the other version. Vixen was an excellent storyteller. This second narrative was even more stunning. It was a tale of life and death misunderstandings, of love as fleeting as the morning dew, separated by the realms of the living and the dead, and by the conflicting worlds of faith and mysticism. The two protagonists were unaware of the full truth for so long, not even knowing each other's real names or true faces. With this foundation, their eventual reunion, the great battles that followed, and their journey to falling in love, a transition from deep angst to profound sweetness, became all the more powerful. Basil was utterly captivated. Even knowing the two were already together, his heart ached for their past struggles. When Vixen reached the part about Julian's confession and their first kiss, Basil couldn't help but slam his fist on the table, a jolt like an electric current running through him. "Ea!" Vixen stood up triumphantly, her paws pattering on the tabletop. And at that moment, I was there. She had been in Caleb's backpack, an adorable witness to their kiss. Basil rolled on the floor in envy. He now recalled the quiet kiss Caleb and Julian had shared in the living room earlier and was filled with regret. Why hadn't he savored the moment? A mountain of sweetness was right in front of him, and he had been completely oblivious. And he had arrived so late. According to Vixen, Julian had been even more clingy and insecure right after they got together. But Basil had been in hibernation back then. So that's the story. "Are you a fan now?" Vixen asked. Basil, unfamiliar with the fandom jargon, just nodded enthusiastically. Vixen clarified that he should just say, "I'm a fan." She then tricked Basil into promising to help her with online polls and promotions in the future before she left him with the phone, showing him where he could find more fan-created content. Basil, ever literal, said he didn't need to. He was a discerning serpent. With the main source right in front of him, why would he look at secondary materials? The next morning, Caleb came downstairs and took out the stainless steel offering bowls, placing incense inside for each of them. He had already forgotten about last night's events and asked casually why Basil wasn't at work yet. Work meant his duty as the guardian of the Central Park's nexus point. He was supposed to be stationed at the bridge there, but now that the park's construction was complete, he was still lounging at Caleb's house. Basil, nibbling on his incense, kept glancing upstairs, wondering why Julian hadn't come down yet. He replied that there was no rush. He would go for a patrol later. His shed skin was hidden under the bridge, so mortals couldn't find the nexus, and he would sense any disturbance instantly. He just needed to make his presence felt occasionally. Caleb assumed he was just being greedy for the incense offerings, which wasn't unusual. Basil's spiritual power was considerable, so Caleb didn't press the issue, merely muttering that work was work and leisure was leisure, and he could take his phone with him. Previously, Basil would have found him annoying but would have had to endure it because of their agreement and the incense. Today was different. Looking at Caleb now, Basil saw him through a filter of sweetness. Even his deceptive tendencies seemed charming. Caleb, however, started to feel uneasy under Basil's intense gaze. A serpent's stare was unnervingly cold, as if it was sizing up a meal. He asked warily what Basil was looking at, and if the incense wasn't enough. He declared that they didn't feed their familiars with raw meat. He then called out for Julian. Julian emerged from the basement, where he had been looking for gardening tools for Caleb's backyard project. Basil flicked his forked tongue, watching their interaction closely. But Caleb just exchanged a few words with Julian about their plans for the day and placed an order for seeds and fertilizer online. There was no physical contact at all. Caleb, unnerved, asked Vixen what was wrong with Basil and why he kept staring. Vixen explained that she had educated him about julep last night, and he had instantly become a fan, gushing about how sweet they were. Caleb walked away weakly. He figured this was probably the most devoted the creature had ever been. The same-day delivery arrived quickly. Caleb signed for the packages, which contained various vegetable and fruit seeds. He had also ordered an automatic irrigation system for when they were away. Caleb seemed genuinely happy. He had experience helping his parents with their balcony garden and knew what to use. Before even breaking ground, he was already excitedly telling Julian about their future, envisioning picking fresh tomatoes from their own yard. He noted that, with the familiars present, they were likely to have a bountiful harvest. Caleb's eyes lit up. "Oh man, I love gardening." Julian watched him with an amused smile and stepped forward to take the heavy bags from his hands. Caleb turned and saw that Vixen and the others had finished their incense. In his good mood, he asked if they wanted more. Vixen cheered in agreement. Ermin also placed a paw delicately on the table. Only Basil, after waiting for so long without seeing any interaction, said irritably, "Why is it still like this? I demand my sugar. Give me some content, you two." Ermin flinched and curled into a ball. Basil banged his bowl on the floor. "Hurry up. Where's the sweetness?" he demanded. He felt completely justified in his request. Caleb was both amused and annoyed. He asked if this was any way to behave. Basil still didn't understand why they called him by that nickname and had given up correcting them. He just banged his bowl again. "What are you talking about? You're a couple." Although Basil was the newest addition, his bowl was the most battered, already covered in small dents. Caleb's patience wore thin. He retorted, asking what Basil meant. Just because they were a couple, did he have to perform his relationship for him? This was getting out of hand. Caleb rubbed the faint red mark on his wrist. Julian walked up behind Caleb, lifted him, and set him on a high bar stool. He told him to let it go. Caleb was confused. Julian then leaned in from the side and kissed him, a kiss that melted all of Caleb's frustration away. He dazedly wrapped his arms around Julian's neck. When the kiss ended, Julian bent down and gently pinched Caleb's cheek. Caleb flinched slightly and was about to smile when he felt that intense stare again. Basil was holding his bowl, his serpentine eyes fixed on them. He was silent, but his focused gaze was deeply unsettling, and his fists were clenched. Caleb knew he wasn't about to start a fight, but he felt like the serpent was about to say something outrageous. Caleb felt his skin crawl. He jumped off the stool and threw his arms around Julian's neck. "Stop kissing me. I told you we can't let him get his way." Caleb spent a few days gardening at home. Meanwhile, news that he had auditioned for the role of Brother Marcus and was a strong contender had spread, sparking considerable discussion. It wasn't just Director Vance. Many people shared the same concern about Caleb. His acting ability was undeniable, but his portrayal of Sterling was so iconic that it was hard to separate him from it. Plus, his youthful, handsome features had so far been associated with more intense, dramatic roles. Brother Marcus was based on a real-life spiritual figure, a stark contrast to Caleb's established image. It felt like too big a leap for an actor trying to break out of a typecast. If the director chose him for his popularity, many wondered what the final performance would look like, feeling it would be jarring. People debated the topic idly, with opinions for and against. Caleb's fans, naturally, expressed their full support, stating that while nothing was confirmed, they had complete faith in their idol's ability to embody the role if he got it. Of course, Caleb had made some enemies during past casting disputes, and their fans had nothing good to say. Some speculated that Caleb's recent surge in popularity had made him arrogant, and that he lacked the depth and serenity to play a character renowned for his calligraphy, literature, and spiritual wisdom. They questioned whether he could truly set aside the glamour of his life to immerse himself in such a role. It wasn't a major controversy, just another topic for online chatter. Overall, Caleb's public image was still very positive. Even those who thought he was a poor fit for Brother Marcus didn't question his talent. Then, someone created a poll asking if people supported him for the role. In a surprising turn of events, the official Twitter account of the Order of the Morning Star, a prominent local spiritual organization, voted and then accidentally shared the poll to their main feed. It took them half a day to notice and delete it, but by then, screenshots were everywhere and the internet was having a field day. What is this? Do priests follow celebrities now? Are they gossiping? Wait, a spiritual order is voting on whether an actor is suitable to play a figure from a different faith. It has a certain "only I truly understand you" vibe. The Order of the Morning Star was an old and respected institution in the region. The fact that they were voting on the casting of a spiritual leader from another tradition gave Caleb's fans a strange sense of kinship. People expected the order to issue a statement, perhaps about a social media manager forgetting to switch accounts and promising better training. Instead, they remained completely silent, feigning ignorance. This was because the person who had slipped was none other than Father Michael, a highly respected elder in their community. When the administrators investigated, they traced it directly to him. Disciples of the order respectfully addressed their elders as Father. Father Michael feigned innocence, claiming he was in a video call discussing theology with another priest when he saw the poll and voted offhandedly. He asked what switching accounts meant. He simply felt Caleb was a good fit. They could hardly reprimand Father Michael for not being dedicated to his spiritual path just because he voted for a celebrity. Who was qualified to lecture him? Even if he started showing up at airports to greet stars, it wouldn't diminish his decades of spiritual achievement. Furthermore, Father Michael wasn't just an elder. His family had been part of the order for generations, and his own predecessors had actually known the real brother Marcus. So if he thought Caleb was suitable, who were they to argue? On Caleb's end, it wasn't long before he received the news from his agency. Director Vance had made his final decision and chosen him. The contracts were ready to be signed. However, the role required a period of intensive training. Caleb had assumed he might have to spend time at a monastery for an immersive experience, and if the production was organizing a unified training program, he was more than willing to participate. Since it was a spiritually active time of year, with many memorial services, Caleb also took some time to help transport souls. The priests at the Order of the Morning Star, following Father Michael's instructions, had prepared a lavish spread of delicacies, eagerly awaiting the arrival of the messenger. Speculation about the messenger was rampant in both the supernatural and mortal realms. All anyone knew for sure was that this particular collector eschewed riches in favor of fine food. This led to two main theories about his true identity. One was that he was the ghost of a car crash victim, his face disfigured. The other was that he was a starving ghost who had died in a car crash on an empty stomach, hence the mask and the voracious appetite. When Caleb floated into the order's headquarters, he saw the priests beaming as they presented a banquet table. They thanked the messenger for his hard work and invited him to eat. Caleb looked at the food and stated coolly that it wasn't necessary. The priests were taken aback. The messenger was suddenly so aloof. In the past, when they prepared a feast, he would not only eat his fill but also summon his friends to join. This new behavior made them worry. Had they done something to displease him? Or had another organization offered better food? Was it the monastery or the other occult society? They asked if the menu wasn't to his liking, offering to change it. Father Michael had insisted they treat the messenger with even more care than a typical collector. Caleb looked at the delicious food and sighed. It wasn't that he was dissatisfied. It was that he was no longer the Caleb who needed to restrict his diet. Besides the training, Director Vance had mentioned that he thought Caleb was a bit too lean and hoped he would gain about 10 pounds before filming began. Caleb had been carefully controlling his weight for his last two roles, so he was on the thinner side. Now he had to bulk up. The studio had hired a professional to create a meal plan for him, which also included exercise to ensure he gained muscle, not just fat. So, Caleb had gone from barely eating enough to eating multiple meals a day. He had just finished a high-calorie late-night snack before coming here and had absolutely no appetite. The priests heard his sigh and asked anxiously what was wrong with the messenger. The famous gourmand of the Underworld was refusing a feast. It was shocking. Caleb, still in character preparation mode, recited a line from the script from an ancient Gnostic text. With less food, the mind finds clarity. The priests fell silent for a moment, then began to panic, whispering amongst themselves with expressions of horror. One priest even took a few steps back, adjusted his vestments, and started shouting as he ran, "Quick, protect the souls." The others immediately formed a protective circle around the newly guided souls that Caleb was supposed to lead to their realm, watching him with suspicion. The fleeing priest was now yelling at the top of his lungs, "Father Michael, it's an emergency. The messenger is defecting to the other side." They had a traitor in their midst. Caleb hadn't anticipated such a quick reaction from the priests. How did they even recognize the quote as belonging to another faction? Seeing them guarding against him as if he were an enemy agent, Caleb quickly denied it, shouting that it was nonsense and he wasn't defecting. But the priests didn't believe him. They blocked his path, preventing him from chasing the fleeing priest or approaching the souls, and asked warily when he had joined the other side. Defections happened everywhere, but the messenger had brought so much glory to their side. To think he would also leave them for the rival faction filled the priests with a sense of sorrow. Caleb sighed, telling them to calm down, that he was just repeating something he'd learned. He didn't understand why they were so sensitive, almost as much as the freeloading serpent at his house. One of the priests stepped forward and declared proudly that it was, of course, because of Old Bill. He had a habit of secretly taking souls with grievances to the monastery for absolution before bringing them back to their realm. They had to be vigilant against the other side poaching souls. Seriously? So it was because Old Bill was a known opportunist that they were always on guard. Caleb had almost forgotten about Old Bill's little habit. The priests, talking amongst themselves, became more convinced. One said it made sense now why the messenger hadn't appeared with Old Bill today. Caleb explained that it was because Old Bill was assisting Grim and Silas. He knew they were in town to capture some powerful entity that had escaped during a recent celestial event. Old Bill, as the local supervisor, was off sucking up to his idols. The priest just replied that was only Caleb's side of the story. Soon, the priest who had run off returned with Father Michael. The old man was a bit confused at first, but after hearing their frantic explanations and seeing Caleb, he pieced together the truth. It was likely that the messenger had landed the acting role. He had voted for Caleb himself, so he knew about the situation. Father Michael, with an air of serene wisdom, stroked his beard and reassured his followers that there was no need to worry. The messenger had not betrayed them. He vouched for Caleb with complete confidence. Caleb nodded in agreement. Though he didn't know how Father Michael was so certain, he chalked it up to the insight of a master. The priests hesitantly handed the souls over to Caleb. After Caleb left, they were still puzzled. The messenger's behavior was very strange. He was quoting rival texts and had lost his appetite. Father Michael just hummed non-committally. One of the priests couldn't help but ask if he knew something they didn't. Father Michael dismissed them, saying they shouldn't meddle in the affairs of the other realm, and walked away. The other priests began to chatter among themselves. Something felt off. Ever since that big battle at the park with the serpent spirit, Father Michael had treated the messenger differently. What had they missed? Vixen saw Caleb up early and asked if he had an event today. Caleb, finishing his morning routine, confirmed that he did. He told her to be good at home and not to bully Ermin, then asked where Basil was. Vixen replied that the sugar demander had eaten his fill yesterday and had gone to patrol the park. Caleb advised her not to give him random nicknames, as it would set him off again. Vixen giggled, saying she only called him that in private, and pointed out that Caleb himself called Ermin Drama Queen. Caleb conceded the point with a sigh, saying that was why he hoped she wouldn't be as shameless as he was. Julian came over and helped Caleb with his tie. Caleb tilted his head back to let him, smiling smugly. The agency had scheduled Caleb for a press conference for a product he endorsed. He hadn't attended any public events while filming and rarely went out in his free time, which baffled his fans. They couldn't understand why such a young actor was such a homebody. No one ever ran into him on the street. Of course, Caleb did go out. He just did so in his spectral form for his part-time job, where no one could encounter him. This press conference was expected to be lively, as many fans who hadn't seen him in a long time would be there. Caleb and Julian took the home elevator down to the basement garage. As they were about to leave, Caleb remembered something. Wait, I need to grab some happy paper. Even though it was a mortal event, experience had taught him that it was always wise to carry some. Julian offered to go with him. Caleb teased him for being so clingy and childish, but he took Julian's hand as they got back in the elevator. Caleb saw Ermin, in his stoat form, waddling slowly towards them and held the elevator door open, asking if he was going up too. Ermin, who was indeed heading upstairs for a snack, looked at the two of them and sighed. He said it was too crowded and that he would wait for the next one to travel during off-peak hours. If he didn't know Ermin's personality and couldn't see spirits himself, he would have thought the stoat was telling a ghost story. Julian casually pressed the closed door button. He told Ermin he should take the stairs for some exercise, remarking that he was getting a little round. The food was good, and Ermin had indeed put on a little weight, but his face was still small, as is typical for a stoat. The last thing Caleb saw before the doors slid shut was the look of pure shock in Ermin's little black eyes. Caleb burst out laughing, thinking that Ermin was probably thinking that step-parents were all terrible. Caleb and Julian drove the car he was endorsing to the event venue. The entrance was already buzzing with activity. Many fans had arrived early. It turned out that not only was the brand holding an event there, but the city's annual interfaith cultural exchange was also taking place in the same building. So, in addition to Caleb's fans, there was a crowd of priests, pastors, monks, and other religious figures posing for a group photo under a large red banner, holding small American flags. Caleb recognized several faces in the crowd, including some from the recent conference. The car swept past them and headed for the parking garage. Caleb glanced back, remarking on how harmonious it all looked. Not only had the local supernatural factions merged, but their mortal counterparts seemed to be getting along quite well too. The venue had 3 floors. The first floor space seemed to be empty for the day. Caleb went backstage first. He had arrived early to get his makeup done and go over the schedule with the host one last time. Soon, the staff announced that entry was now open, and fans began lining up with their tickets. Meanwhile, Officer Leo Wong was still standing by the entrance, texting his friends, asking where they were and telling them he was by the large promotional standee. 2 young women approached him cautiously, confirming he was alone before asking hesitantly if he was Lily. The event organizers had specifically invited Lily, an artist who had drawn popular fan art of Caleb, and had commissioned him to create a piece related to the endorsement, which would be presented to Caleb on stage. Some fans in the know had arranged to meet him, but when they saw him, they were stunned. Who was this man well over 6 feet tall? Leo confirmed he was Lily and shook their hands. He was a genuine admirer of Caleb's work and had created some art, making him a casual fan, so he had accepted the invitation. The last time he had seen Caleb in person, the actor hadn't been famous yet. The 2 girls were still reeling. But, you're Lily. How? Forget the art style. Lily was a girl's name. Leo explained that his full name was Leo Wong, and Lily was a play on his name. He suggested they go inside together, noting that they looked quite young and asking if their parents knew they were there. Despite his own youth, Leo's tone carried a parental authority that put the girls on edge. It was a stark contrast to their online interactions, where text couldn't convey his commanding presence. The girls stammered that they knew and that they were both adults. Leo's sharp gaze swept over them. Really? Let me see your IDs. He caught himself. Sorry, occupational hazard. As long as your parents know, it's fine. Let's go in. I think my pass gets us through the staff entrance. They entered the venue as fans were still finding their seats and the media was setting up. The girls cautiously asked Lily, "Sir, you don't happen to have a full sleeve tattoo, do you?" It was well known among the fan base that Caleb had some very tough-looking male fans. Given Leo's demeanor, they half expected him to be one of them. Leo replied with a weary sigh, "I'm a police officer." That explained the parental yet stricter than apparent vibe. The 2 girls muttered to each other, "Our boy really does appeal to both sides of the law." Leo wanted to object but found he had nothing to say. Before Caleb even arrived, Leo found himself surrounded by fans who recognized him from his online persona. Everyone had settled in, and the host was on stage warming up the crowd. Caleb was due to appear any minute. But at that moment, the sky outside abruptly darkened. A sudden, violent downpour began, and after 2 deafening claps of thunder, the lights inside the venue flickered and went out completely. Plunging the hall into darkness, punctuated only by the small glowing screens of electronic devices. Gasps and cries filled the room. The host quickly recovered, his voice booming through the dark, assuring everyone it was likely a circuit issue and asking them to remain seated. But people were pointing outside. Why was it dark out there too? It was the middle of the afternoon, yet it looked like midnight. Not a sliver of sunlight remained. Combined with the power outage, it was deeply unsettling. Leo, driven by professional instinct, stood up to help maintain order. He shouted for everyone to remain calm, explaining that it was probably just very thick, low-hanging storm clouds affecting visibility, and asked them to wait in their seats for the power to be restored. As a local, he had seen similar weather phenomena before, a sudden daytime darkness, so he could offer a rational explanation. His words seemed to calm the crowd, and some even took out their phones to capture the strange event for social media. The press conference, however, would clearly be delayed. The fans, who had been on the verge of seeing Caleb, sighed in disappointment, hoping the power would be fixed quickly. At the same time, on the second floor, at the Interfaith Cultural Exchange, the assembled spiritual leaders were relatively composed in the darkness. After contacting the venue staff and learning that a repair crew was on it, they settled in to wait calmly. Some even began to mate. Backstage, Caleb was also plunged into darkness. The brand representatives apologized profusely, explaining that the abnormal weather had likely caused the outage and that they were doing everything they can to fix it. Caleb told them it was fine and that he would wait. There were several people in the room with him from his agency and the brand. Julian had just stepped out to the restroom. Caleb was thinking that as long as he had his phone, it would be fine when he felt a sudden, sharp tug on his wrist, a pulling sensation. His expression changed instantly. The brand reps thought he was suddenly angry. "Mr. Caleb will go supervise the repairs right now." "It's nothing," Caleb said with a forced smile. "I just feel a bit stuffy. I'm gonna get some air. Don't worry about me." He declined their offers to accompany him and hurried out, leaving his jacket on a chair outside the door. He followed the direction of the pulling sensation. The link between Caleb and Julian was a spectral tether. This feeling could only mean that Julian was in some kind of trouble. To confirm, Caleb tried calling Julian's phone as he walked. As he expected, there was no answer. This floor was full of staff, so Caleb couldn't easily leave his body. He grabbed a brochure to shield his face, and in the dim light, no one paid him any mind. Caleb made his way to the second floor. In the dark stairwell, he moved silently, and then he heard a mournful, singing voice. The melody was haunting, a lament that seemed to seep into one's bones and chill them from the inside. Who was singing in here? Caleb cautiously approached the source and peered around the corner. A woman in a blue dress was sitting on the windowsill of the hallway, singing to the stormy world outside. A few scattered sheets of paper, covered in sigils, lay on the floor near her. Caleb looked closer and recognized Julian's handwriting. He leaned out a bit further and saw Julian entangled in a blue, shimmering sash, his wrists bound so he couldn't use his sword. His soul was flickering on the verge of being pulled from his body. Julian's spectral steed, Equus 001, was frantically biting at the sash, which was the only thing keeping Julian from being completely subdued. Julian hadn't been training with the sword for long, but the woman in blue was clearly no ordinary spirit. The sheer intensity of her malevolent energy sent a jolt of alarm through Caleb. He was about to leave his body when a nearby door burst open. Several priests rushed out, their ceremonial blades slicing through the sash binding Julian. Chanting in an ancient tongue, they formed a protective circle around him. A few monks followed them out and surrounded the woman in blue. "Audacious spirit, did you not know we were holding a conference today? How dare you cause harm here?" The woman in blue seemed surprised, as if she, an ancient ghost, had never seen such coordinated interfaith cooperation. But when the monks raised their holy implements to attack, she reacted with lightning speed. With a casual wave of her hand, a sleeve shimmering with dark energy wrapped around a monk's neck. She continued to hum her haunting tune, completely at ease. One of the younger monks, recognizing the nature of the spirit, paled. He reached out to grab the sleeve, reciting a protective prayer. The woman's voice grew colder, and the temperature in the hallway plummeted. Condensation beaded on the walls. Her beautiful, lifelike face began to show a deathly pallor. Her song became more menacing, a twisted litany of defiance. The young monk felt a freezing pain, as if his fingers were about to snap off. He pulled his hand back and saw the tips had turned black. But what terrified him more was that his prayers had no effect on her. Julian called out to him, "She knows the holy texts. Let the priests handle her." The sigils he had thrown earlier had been useless against her. The monk, stunned, quickly urged the priests forward. One of his companions was already turning purple, choked by the sash. But as the priests advanced, swords raised. The beads of water on the walls shot out like icy projectiles, striking them. A layer of frost formed on their bodies, their limbs stiffening with cold, making it nearly impossible to move. This wasn't water. It was pure malevolent energy, solidified. Just then, a spectral horse charged forward, biting through the sash around the monk's neck and freeing him. He collapsed to the floor, coughing violently. Seeing the spectral steed, many of them realized who must be near. The messenger? Sure enough, the figure of the messenger materialized from the stairwell, his spectral tether in hand. A collective sigh of relief went through the group. It took a spirit to fight a spirit. Caleb moved to Julian's side, taking his hand, a sense of reassurance washing over him. His physical body was just a few feet away in the stairwell, but he couldn't worry about that now. He put on a deceptive smile and addressed the woman in blue, asking if she was also a student of faith. The woman looked at him impassively. The monks began to whisper among themselves, looking at their young colleague, who looked deeply troubled. He had guessed that this spirit had some kind of spiritual training in life, which was why their methods were ineffective. The priest's tactics worked, but without a master like Father Michael present, they were outmatched. Thankfully, the messenger had arrived. Caleb continued, saying that he had also been studying scripture lately, so they were practically colleagues. He suggested that she should therefore possess some spirit of compassion. The monks suddenly looked hopeful. The priests from the Order of the Morning Star quickly shot down the idea, insisting he had not defected. The woman in blue looked at Caleb coolly. "A collector? Are you looking for Bill?" "What Bill?" From the ghost's demeanor, she was either seeking revenge or just wanted to watch the world burn. The name was probably the source of her obsession. At first, Caleb thought she was after Julian, but her attacks had been indiscriminate, directed at Julian, the priests, and the monks alike. There was no sign she intended to possess Julian. Caleb gestured to Julian and said, "No, I'm looking for this one." The woman's cold composure wavered for a moment. "You lie. Don't get agitated." "I'm not lying. I really don't know him," Caleb said. "Miss, do you hate this Bill so much you came here to kill him?" The woman stated flatly, "Bill is already dead." Caleb was confused. "Dead? What was your relationship? Did he wrong you? If he's dead, you should let it go." "No," she replied. Caleb couldn't tell if she meant she wouldn't let it go or something else. This ghost's energy was incredibly powerful. His intuition told him she was extremely dangerous. He had secretly sent out a distress signal a moment ago and was now trying to stall for time, to play for time until his backup arrived. He continued to probe, "You seem like you were a very kind person in life. What did this jerk do to you? Tell me. We're very reasonable in our line of work." The woman produced a small file from her sleeve. The young monk looked even more dismayed. It was a vessel used by his own order to capture spirits. She opened it and spoke into it. "Bill, you tell him. We have no quarrel." Caleb started to say, "Wait, Bill is in the file." Before old Bill's voice echoed from within, "I'm dying in here. Dad, get me out." The temperature dropped even further. The woman's eyes turned crimson. "You are lying. You said you weren't looking for Bill." Caleb shouted, "It's a misunderstanding. I seriously had no idea my own son's name was Bill." Serafina stared at Caleb, her eyes filled with what could only be described as profound disbelief. She clearly thought he was either mad or a pathological liar. It wasn't just the ghost. The mortal spiritualists were also questioning him. How could a father not know his own son's name? Names held great power in the supernatural world. Familiars were often referred to by their rank, and collectors by their titles. Even a great ascetic like Brother Thomas was known by another name in the spirit realm. So their shock was understandable. They didn't know old Bill's real name either, but the messenger was his partner. Their familial bond was a well-known piece of gossip in the local supernatural community. How could he not know? It struck many of them as deeply strange, but they couldn't figure out why. Caleb, feeling their stares, grew irritated. What could he do? Old Bill had just never told him his real name, and he'd never thought to ask. Old Bill had always been sufficient. Besides, he added, their father-son dynamic was hardly conventional. Serafina ignored his excuses, her aura growing colder, the blue of her dress deepening. "You are Bill's father?" Caleb smiled. "That I am. I suppose that makes us family, doesn't it, daughter?" The assembled clergy stared. He really knew how to press an advantage. Serafina stated coolly, "I have no connection to him and even less to you." Caleb tried to keep the conversation going. His distress signal had been sent a while ago. Reinforcements could arrive at any moment. His organization's culture of ganging up on powerful foes was not to be forgotten. Against Serafina, he didn't feel confident without a mob at his back. He asked why, if there was no connection, she had captured him. He suspected a tragic love story. Serafina looked at him intently. "He is Bill." Old Bill couldn't stand it anymore and clarified from inside the file. He explained that it was a terrible injustice. Serafina had already said they had no connection, yet Caleb was trying to paint him as a heartbreaker. In some past life, he and Serafina had been lovers, but he had since reincarnated and become a spirit. She no longer cared for this new version of him, calling him crass and worldly. She was looking for the original faithless lover who had reincarnated before her. That was why she had captured him. "My dear boy, is that even possible?" Serafina, who had been trapped in the underworld for so long her thoughts were sometimes confused, asked Caleb again, "You are here for Bill, aren't you?" Caleb denied it once more. "I'm really not looking for him. I haven't seen him in days. I heard he was with Grimm and Silas. No reason to look for him." Serafina repeated the names, Grimm, Silas. Caleb thought to himself, Old Bill had said he was going to assist Grimm and Silas, but he ended up captured by Serafina. Hadn't they tried to rescue him? Old Bill shouted from the file, "She's the ghost Grimm and Silas are trying to catch. They used me as bait, but she has this blessed file that traps spirits, and the whole thing went sideways. Send a message to Grimm and Silas. Quick!" Serafina stoppered the file again, murmuring that he wasn't supposed to say so much. The other spiritualists' faces changed. If this was a ghost that Grimm and Silas were after, no wonder she was so powerful. Caleb, however, was piecing it together. So Old Bill had a love debt from a past life. Serafina escaped from the underworld to find her former lover. Because she had spiritual training from her mortal life, she had to be apprehended by the local supernatural authority. Grimm and Silas tried to use Old Bill as bait to lure her out, but when she saw him, she was horrified. "My God, my love has turned into this?" She refused to acknowledge him but captured him anyway, subconsciously unable to let him go. That seemed to be the gist of it. What a mess. Caleb secretly folded a piece of paper into a messenger bird while continuing to talk. "So what's your plan now, since he's not the one you're looking for?" Serafina seemed to see right through his little trick. "It's useless," she said coldly. Caleb didn't miss a beat, smiling. "Says you." The young monk coughed. "I'm afraid she may be right, messenger. Look at the sky. Caleb glanced outside at the night-like conditions. The clouds are thick. So what? The monk said with a bitter smile. You don't know? When day turns to night, it's a nocturne, an umbral event. The poles are reversed. All spiritual beings, including collectors, lose their sense of direction. Ancient texts warned that the appearance of a nocturne heralded great upheaval. When Een became young, disaster followed. It was a time when the natural order was subverted. Indeed, under such celestial conditions, it was easy to get away with things. While history had recorded several such events, they didn't always lead to chaos, especially in the modern era where flicking on a light switch negated much of the impact. But for supernatural beings, a nocturne was still a time of great opportunity. Caleb hadn't known the significance of this phenomenon, but hearing the monk's explanation, he grew wary. Was this a coincidence? He didn't think so. What are you going to do with old Bill? He asked, tightening his grip on his spectral tether. Serafina answered with a non sequitur. When I took my vows, there were 3 masters and 7 witnesses. My teacher asked me 3 times if I was certain I wanted to renounce the world before they cut my hair and gave me the name Serafina. I upheld 300 vows on my path to enlightenment. 14 years of discipline. But for him, she meant old Bill's past self. With a single word, I gave up 14 years of devotion and followed him. When a novice takes vows, it is a solemn ceremony. But to leave the order, to renounce the vows, regardless of how many years one has served, a simple verbal declaration is all that is required. Serafina looked at the monks, her gaze finally settling on Julian. She gave a faint smile. You should understand. Especially you. The monks shook their heads innocently. Julian was often mistaken for a monk, and now he was being mistaken for a defrocked one. Julian said impassively, Things are more official now, ma'am. You need a license to be a monk, and you have to file paperwork to resign. A single sentence won't cut it. Serafina's self-pitying tears, which had been about to fall, receded. I fell into the underworld because I tried to bring him back from the dead. But he broke his promise and reincarnated without me. Now, after so many cycles, he is this Bill. He doesn't know me, and I despise what he has become. Old Bill, from his file, let out a silent scream. Even if I brought him back, what would be the point? I know that past and present lives are not the same person. So, seeing our old Bill made you realize your love is dead? He's not that bad, Caleb said dryly. Exactly. So you can let him out now, right? Serafina said softly, I have let go. I have no more connection to him. I want nothing more in this world to disturb my peace. I only wish to return to the world of the living, to retake my vows, to reclaim my name. That didn't sound right. She claimed that past and present lives were different, yet she still intended to kill him. That was contradictory and unreasonable. Caleb thought that she didn't seem like someone who was truly disillusioned with old Bill and wanted to return to a life of piety. She had clearly been twisted by her experiences. How could a true spiritual seeker believe that killing a former lover was the way to sever worldly ties? She wanted to use the chaos of the nocturne to return to life, a clever plan. But once she returned, she would be immortal. Wouldn't she be afraid of him immediately reaping her soul? As Caleb thought this, his eyes met Serafina's, and a chill ran down his spine. Of course, that's why Serafina wouldn't want any obstacles around when she performed the ritual. And she would need a body to inhabit. She would have to eliminate anyone who might interfere, or who could potentially interfere. That was why she had attacked Julian first. Her guilty conscience had made her see him as a threat. The next moment, Serafina raised her hand, and the blue sash whipped towards them. Caleb barely dodged it. He grabbed the sash on its next pass, struggling against its strength. With a great effort, he tore it. The piece in his hand dissolved into a black, icy liquid that felt like it was freezing his very soul. He blew on his hand to warm it, forgetting that his own breath was also cold. Julian, still in his physical body, took Caleb's hand and placed it inside his jacket. the warmth of his body instantly soothing the supernatural chill. Many of the others, who didn't know Julian, were taken aback by the scene. They had seen the two together before, but not like this. It was strange. Only the young monk understood, but he dared not say a word. "You guys hold her off. I need to make some papercraft," Caleb shouted to the priests from the order. "Call for backup. If you can't reach Grimm and Silas, call for mortal help. Get Father Michael here." A priest snapped out of his stupor and agreed, but as Seraphina sensed their intent to call for help, she waved her hand, and all their phones instantly frosted over. They would still turn on, but the extreme cold had drained their batteries to zero. Caleb ducked down and began furiously folding paper. Although many spiritual leaders were present for the conference, not all of them were equipped to handle supernatural combat. Some had never even seen a spirit manifest before. They had to be protected by the others. The young monk gathered everyone into a corner of the conference room, where they began to chant and pray in their various traditions. Those with combat skills joined the fray against Seraphina. While Caleb folded paper, Julian drew sigils. His sigils were ineffective against Seraphina directly, but they could be used to empower Caleb's papercraft. A sense of unease grew in Caleb. How long would this nocturne last? If no backup arrived, could they hold out? This former nun-in-law was terrifyingly strong. Just then, Caleb heard one of the priests cry out, "Who's that? Over there by the wall. Is that a staff member? They look like they're being strangled." Caleb looked up and saw Seraphina's sash wrapped around a body dressed in a white shirt and black trousers, its face covered. Caleb's blood ran cold. "My body." He remembered he still had some of the matriarch's enchanted nail clippings. He quickly burned them, infusing himself with their power, and lunged at Seraphina, ignoring the intense cold as he tore at the blue sash to retrieve his physical form. He held it tightly, his heart pounding. If it had been destroyed, he would have been done for. The spiritualists, seeing Caleb's fierce protection of the innocent bystander, assumed it was just his concern for human life. Those who couldn't fight offered to check on the victim, who appeared to be unconscious. No, Caleb stopped them from taking his body. He placed it under a table, saying dismissively, "Don't worry about him now. He's fine, just fainted. Leave him there." A priest from the order, who was also a trained medic, insisted that they shouldn't be careless and offered to check his pulse. Caleb was in a bind. The young monk quickly intervened. "I'll watch over him." As an insider, Caleb trusted him with his body. The other spiritualists exchanged puzzled glances. The messenger was acting very strangely, and since when did the young monk know medicine? The priest from the order was a much better choice. Was the messenger really not a defector? Meanwhile, on the third floor, after waiting in the dark for a while, people had started to get restless. A murmur went through the crowd. "Is it just me? Or is it getting colder? The lights are out, but is the AC still on? What temperature is it set to? It must have gotten colder outside with all this rain. I hear this kind of weather can sometimes bring hail. Does anyone hear that noise from downstairs? That's the religious conference. Probably monks and priests chanting. Maybe some of them are warrior monks." For some reason, Officer Leo Wong felt a growing sense of unease. He walked to the window and looked out at the bizarre, night-like day. It reminded him of his partner, the kid. He hadn't seen him in a while. He wondered where he had gone. With nothing else to do, Leo took out his pocket notebook and, using his phone's flashlight, began to sketch. "Are you drawing, Mr. Caleb?" One of the young fans asked, leaning over his shoulder. "So cute." "No, Leo smiled. It's a friend of mine." He was drawing the kid, but without his tall signature hat. Otherwise, anyone who had read his comic, My Underworld Partner, would have recognized him. It was how he imagined his partner in his daily life. He idly sketched a grotesque-looking old Bill next to him. "Oh," the fan said, "I thought it was Mr. Caleb." An image of a pair of eyes flashed in Leo's mind. He was about to say something when the host announced that the power would be back on soon, drawing everyone's attention and sparking a wave of cheers. Power meant they would see Caleb soon. The view shifted from the third-floor window to the window directly below it on the second floor, where chaos reigned. Serafina had discovered that Caleb was continuously creating paper animals to attack her from a distance. That was manageable. They were mostly a distraction, protecting the other spiritualists. But then Caleb started folding paper versions of Old Bill. He sent 5 paper Old Bills flying out to rescue the others. Serafina, who claimed to have no connection to Bill, was clearly affected. She knew, deep down, that she had recognized him the moment she first saw him in the Underworld. Even after reincarnation, with a completely different personality, his soul still carried the scent of his past life. This change had thrown her into a state of extreme emotional turmoil. And now Caleb had arranged the paper figures so that no matter which way she turned, she was face to face with a paper Old Bill. It was a cruel blow. "You!" Serafina shrieked, her composure finally breaking. She lunged at Caleb, her hands outstretched to strangle him. Infused with the matriarch's power, Caleb arched his back and leaped away. He threw a small, folded paper sword. "Spirit of steel, light divine, command the elements. Let no evil pass this line." The paper sword flew with a sharp edge. But Serafina caught it between her long, slender fingers. "All things are empty." Caleb expected the sword to turn to ash like his other creations, but with a flick of her wrist, she reversed its direction, holding it by the hilt, and sent it flying back at him. As Caleb moved to dodge, a dark shape shot past him and clamped down on the paper sword. The one who had caught it slowly looked up. Cold, serpentine eyes stared at Serafina. Though he was in human form, his shadow stretched and writhed on the floor, taking the shape of a giant snake. The shadow loomed over Serafina. It was Basil, who was supposed to be patrolling the park. Without looking back, Basil tossed the sword back to Caleb. Serafina looked at the snake shadow and recognized it. A serpent spirit. Caleb was also stunned. "Basil, what are you doing here?" Basil retorted, "Didn't you send a distress signal?" Caleb had indeed sent a signal to all his familiars and collector colleagues, including Basil. He was confused. "I did, but with the Nocturne, shouldn't all spiritual senses be scrambled? Grimm and Silas are still lost out there." Basil replied, "I saw it on the news. I came straight here." The other spiritualists and Serafina didn't understand, but Caleb did. Basil had been tracking his and Julian's movements. He didn't need a spiritual signal to find them. The park wasn't far, and he had simply come to the address mentioned in the news report about the event. Thank goodness for that. Seeing Basil, Caleb's confidence surged. Basil was a powerful fighter. Serafina stared at Basil. Though she didn't know this particular serpent spirit, she could sense his immense power. Hearing Caleb call him by that name, she asked Serpent, "Are you also looking for Bill?" Basil was bewildered. "Are you insane? Who the hell is Bill? And who are you calling Serpent?" "I am Basil." Serafina was confused. "But he called you." Basil snapped, "I don't know why he calls me that. My rank is 13. The young monk was particularly perplexed. Basil didn't know? Even he had figured it out. "Enough talk. Bill is Old Bill. We need to get him out of there," Caleb shouted. Seeing that backup had arrived, he pulled Julian up and rallied the others to charge forward and grab the file from Serafina. Basil, however, hesitated. Bill is Old Bill? He didn't particularly like Old Bill. In that moment of hesitation, Serafina struck. Her sash lashed out, a wave of dark energy sending the spiritualists flying. Even with the matriarch's speed, Caleb lost his footing while dodging. Julian caught him from behind. Caleb yelled in frustration, "Why are you so petty?" Serafina was wary of the serpent spirit. Though she didn't know his full strength, serpent spirits were known for their ferocity and tenacity in battle. They would fight to the death even if outmatched. But now it seemed the serpent had some conflict with Bill. After Caleb's words, his eyes had changed, a cold glint appearing in them. As Caleb fell into his companion's arms, Seraphina saw the serpent spirit ignore her and instead stalk towards the complaining collector. Raising his hand, Seraphina smiled knowingly. It was said that the familiars were the opportunists of the spirit world, their loyalties as fickle as their moods. The other spiritualists' faces paled. Serpent spirits were known for being vengeful and unpredictable. They wanted to warn Caleb, but it felt hopeless. Even if they did, they were no match for Basil. Before anyone could say a word, Basil slammed his hand down, pushing Caleb's head forward, pressing his lips firmly against Julian's. MMPH. Caleb struggled, trying to push himself up. Get up? Not a chance. Basil held him fast, a tung-ning grin on his face. Caleb, his head pinned, was going insane. What was Basil doing? They were in the middle of a fight. He had just stumbled. Why was Basil pushing his head down? Was this something a respectable familiar was supposed to do? Caleb could feel countless shocked stares on him and Julian, from the monks and priests to Seraphina herself. Everyone was stunned by the current situation. Even though Caleb was wearing a mask, it was clearly a kiss. And from Basil's deliberate action, it was clear he was aiming for the mouth. What was happening? What was this? Was this the serpent spirit's revenge? It didn't seem very serious, just deeply humiliating. And in the face of a powerful enemy, wasn't it a bit childish? It was a slight against the messenger, but it was also disrespectful to the main boss. The question marks were practically materializing over Seraphina's head. Caleb struggled to get up, still feeling the pressure on the back of his head, keeping him and Julian together. Finally, after he pounded the floor in frustration a few times, Basil let go. Basil looked very pleased with himself, even flicking his forked tongue. The sugar demander, true to his name. Caleb, his face flushed with embarrassment, scrambled to his feet, only to see the serpent spirit looking like he had just witnessed something sublime. He was so angry he could spit fire. "You can get off on this?" Caleb yelled, still smiling. "Don't you know forced sweetness isn't sweet?" Basil was shocked. "You two are forced?" Julian slowly sat up. Not at all. The crowd went wild. Many of them were still processing what they had just seen. One moment they were thinking, so the messenger has these kinds of interests. He's probably not a defector after all. The next, they were thinking, so this is a serpent spirit? He gets this excited watching two men kiss. Amazing. Wait a minute. That's clearly a living person. The messenger is involved with a mortal? It all felt very strange. Seraphina, who had previously maintained the composure of a spiritual master, no matter her inner turmoil, could no longer keep up the facade. The dark energy around her intensified, and her dress began to billow as if in a strong wind. Despicable. It was unclear if she was disgusted by Basil's disrespectful behavior or the public display of affection. Basil, having just gotten his sugar, was spoiling for a fight. He let out a disdainful laugh and lunged at Seraphina at the same time she struck. One sent a billowing sleeve, the other a shadowy serpent, and they clashed in mid-air. Caleb told the young monk, "Go find someone with a working phone. Call for help." The young monk nodded and took Caleb's body from Julian. Even with Basil's arrival boosting their strength, a full-blown fight would cause a lot of collateral damage. This was a populated area, with media and fans just one floor above. The young monk tried to get to the stairwell, but Seraphina wouldn't let him. Just as he reached the door, a sash flew out and wrapped around his neck, dragging him back. Looking closer, they saw that Seraphina was chanting. Her hands pressed together, and spectral arms bloomed from her back, each holding a shimmering blue sash. She had manifested a 1,000-armed form, allowing her to fight both Basil and the young monk simultaneously. Basil's eyes narrowed. He knew this ghost was formidable, which only fueled his desire for battle. Scales began to appear on his cheeks as he threw himself at her. Seraphina's face was a mask of compassion, but her attacks were merciless. No one was safe. Her blue sashes seemed to fill the room, lashing out at everyone. Basil couldn't protect them all and focused on attacking her directly, aiming for a critical blow. The others huddled together, the non-combatants in the center, the fighters on the outside. Caleb was at the forefront, his spectral tether in one hand, a soul-guiding fan in the other, too busy to fold more paper. Julian, holding Caleb's body, also had his sword drawn. Someone behind them said, "Let us take him." Julian refused. Everyone was puzzled. Now was not the time to be possessive of a random bystander. Why was he so protective? Serafina and Basil were locked in close combat. Her deep, dark eyes glowed with a faint light, seeing through to Basil's true form. "Black Serpent, we are of the same kind. You too fell into this cycle because of anger in a past life. If I am to be reincarnated, I will likely enter the animal realm as well, become one of your kind." Basil just snorted. He had indeed been a spiritual practitioner in a past life. This Serafina's mortal cultivation must have been impressive for her to see his origins. Serafina continued, "Today the poles are reversed. I have a technique to turn back the clock. If you join me, I can help you reincarnate into a human body as well." Basil remained silent, just continuing his fierce assault. Not interested. Serafina parried his blow and glanced at Caleb, but her eyes were fixed on his physical body. "There's a perfectly good body right there. Just say the word, and I will let you inhabit that collector's form. Let him be a snake for a while. Feel the pain of shedding his skin every year." The others were stunned. What did she mean, that collector's form? They looked at the body Julian was holding. The messenger? Caleb cursed inwardly. One after another, they were using their sharp eyes to out him as a living collector. Good thing he had kept his face covered. "What are you looking at?" "Yes, I'm a living collector. I've been lying to you all." "So what?" Caleb felt their gazes, even more intense than when they had seen him kiss a man. "Can you please focus on the fight? Why do you care about me?" The priests from the order were dumbfounded. "But, messenger, how can you be a living collector?" "No, wait. It all made sense now. The fact that he was a living collector explained so many things. Why he didn't care for money, why he was with a mortal, why he covered his face. He wasn't disfigured at all. He just didn't want anyone to know he was a living collector. Though they didn't know why, it showed an extreme level of caution. The city was so big, yet he was worried about being recognized. It felt like they were missing a crucial piece of the puzzle, but for now, they were all just shocked by the revelation. Serafina, who had casually outed Caleb, didn't think much of it. Her main target was Basil. "Well?" she prompted, but Basil was unmoved by her offer. Though he craved sweetness and drama, his core discipline as a serpent spirit was stability. He could get lost in other stories, but he himself had never gotten romantically involved with a human. Those who couldn't maintain that control usually ended up in a bad way. So, Serafina's temptation was nothing to a serpent who had cultivated for centuries. In terms of sheer willpower in that room, Julian was probably first, and he was second. Basil just snarled, "Get lost." "I'm not interested." Serafina was taken aback. She looked at Caleb again. "Why? Are you his familiar?" "But I don't sense it." From her perspective, Basil was not a bound familiar. If he were, she wouldn't have tried to sway him. Familiars could be fickle and might abandon their masters, but they would never betray them in the heat of battle. Basil struck at her fiercely. "I'm a wild familiar." He was just crashing at Caleb's place for the food. He was still a free agent. The snake seemed a bit dim-witted. "A wild familiar?" Serafina sighed. "Then I'm afraid I'll have to send you all on your way. Since you know Bill, you can keep him company." As if anyone wanted to keep old Bill company. Serafina closed her eyes. Her blue sashes multiplied, growing longer, becoming impossible to fend off. Even Basil was ensnared. The sashes began to spread, reaching for the windows. A whirlwind suddenly appeared outside, slamming against the glass without shattering it. A figure leaped through the window, landing on Seraphina, tumbling with her across the floor before pinning her down with a feral roar. In an instant, the thousand-armed form, the room-filling sashes, all vanished like a mirage. All that remained was the woman in blue, lying on the floor, her face no longer compassionate, but twisted with dark energy. It wasn't just Caleb. Even Basil was still processing what had happened. It had all been an illusion. And the one crouching on Seraphina, her claws at her throat, who had broken the illusion. Caleb called out, "Is that you, Vixen?" If Basil could figure out how to get here from the news, Vixen, who knew his schedule, should have been able to find her way as well, even if she wasn't as fast. Just then, the lights on the second floor flickered on. The bright light fell upon the figure, illuminating a stunningly beautiful face. Long, sharp nails pressed against Seraphina's neck, and her crimson lips curled back in a snarl, a drop of saliva dripping down. Caleb gasped, "The matriarch." On the third floor, someone by the window shouted, "Hey, there are lights on the second floor." Many people rushed over to see. The light from below was a clear beacon in the darkness, illuminating the trees outside. It seemed the repairs were progressing well. The third floor should be next. But after waiting for a few more minutes, the third floor remained dark. The brand representatives were on the phone with the venue staff. The third floor would take another half an hour to an hour? Why so long? Weren't the circuits connected? What about the first floor? The fans overheard snippets of the conversation and craned their necks to see. Moving to the first floor? That was a possibility. After the call, the brand reps conferred. Only the second floor had power. The third floor would be out for at least another hour. There was a smaller, empty hall on the second floor, but they would have to set everything up again. Should they wait here or move? With all the media and fans waiting, and the storm outside making it difficult to leave, the grumbling was getting louder. "By the way, where's Mr. Caleb?" "He went to get some air. I'll text him," Dana said. "I've seen that hall downstairs. It's much smaller. Your equipment won't fit on the stage." "I have an idea," she suggested. "Let's go down to where there's power. I'll have Caleb come and chat with everyone. Keep them happy while we wait for the power to be restored up here. Then we can come back up." That sounded like a good plan. "What, Vixen? You're thinking of that little fox? How dare you mistake me for her?" The matriarch's voice was a melodic purr of indignation. It should have been charmingly coquettish, but her fur was still bristled from the fight. Her mouth stretched in a snarl that revealed sharp fangs. Caleb stammered an apology, explaining that he had sent a signal to Vixen, not to her. The matriarch explained that the local nexus had been stabilized, and she had come to report the good news, only to find a nocturne and this mess. She bent down and sniffed Seraphina's face, her voice dropping to a low whisper. She recalled another nocturne chaos, centuries ago, when a dark cult caused a massive explosion in the city, killing thousands before they were finally vanquished. Centuries ago? Caleb had read about a mysterious great explosion in the city's history from that era. The sky had changed suddenly, strange sounds were heard, and a mushroom cloud appeared. The explosion had killed or injured countless people, and many survivors found their clothes mysteriously blown off. The royal palace was damaged, and the young crown prince was killed by falling debris, altering the course of history. Historical records described a great tremor, trees uprooted, and a crater several yards deep. The cause of this unprecedented catastrophe remains a mystery to this day, with theories ranging from a gunpowder explosion to a meteor impact, a tornado, or even a giant ball of lightning. Caleb had read it as a historical oddity, but now, hearing the matriarch speak of it, he realized the truth. The celestial anomaly before that explosion was likely a nocturne, and the disaster was caused by a supernatural entity taking advantage of the chaos. An event of that magnitude had only happened once. In the modern era, with gods and demons in hiding, it was much harder for such things to occur. But now, with a spiritually active month coinciding with a nocturne, a being like Serafina had emerged. Serafina, caught off guard by the arrival of a powerful fox spirit matriarch who had shattered her illusions, wiped a drop of the matriarch's saliva from her face with a resentful look. "Are you also here for Bill?" The matriarch, though not fully briefed, played along. "And what if I am? What's your relationship with him?" She at least knew old Bill's name. Serafina grabbed her, her own nails growing to match the matriarch's in length, digging into her shoulders. "No relationship." The matriarch cried out in pain and leaped back. She felt a dark energy seeping into her wounds from the scratches. But she was far more graceful than Vixen. She simply drew a sigil in the air to stop the corruption and then reached for Serafina, chanting a powerful exorcism rite from her own tradition, a lineage focused on life and death, capable of turning unholy spirits to dust. Serafina knew she was in danger and dodged frantically. Her illusions were useless against the matriarch, and Basil had now joined forces with her. The tide had turned. Serafina shrieked, her sashes of dark energy flying wildly, smashing tables, chairs, and screens. The commotion was immense, not as big as the historical explosion, but enough to force the spiritualists to retreat to the side. At that moment, they all heard a clamor from the direction of the stairwell. A priest from the order said, "Isn't there some celebrity event happening upstairs? It sounds like people are coming down." It wasn't just one or two people. It was a crowd. The spiritualists all had the same thought. They couldn't let them come down. It wasn't just about revealing the supernatural world. If Serafina, the matriarch, and Basil were fighting at full strength, any mortals who wandered in would become collateral damage. Fortunately, the spiritualists were now free to act. The young monk, who had been restrained by Serafina earlier, rushed past the battle. Serafina was too preoccupied to stop him now. He burst through the stairwell door just as a group of people were descending, only a few steps away from the fight, separated by a single wall. Seeing him blocking the doorway, they all stared at each other. The host asked, hello? We need to get through." The young monk, his face a stony mask, said no. The host was confused. "The power is still out on the third floor. We arranged with the venue to use the small hall on this floor." "No," the young monk repeated. "I'm sorry, there are too many of us in here, and the AC is broken. Please go back or go to the first floor." He refused to budge. The group was speechless. They could hear loud crashing sounds from behind him, and they noticed the monk himself was disheveled. The venue staff were also puzzled. "Sir, what are you doing in there?" The young monk insisted, "Nothing. There's a vicious dog on the loose. We're trying to contain it." "That's ridiculous. First too many people, now a vicious dog." After waiting for so long, many were impatient, and the monk's strange behavior only made them more curious. "Are they fighting in there? Monks fighting priests? Something's definitely not right, and they won't let us in. Forget him, let's just go in. They didn't rent the whole floor. Why can't we pass?" The noise was so loud that those inside could hear it. A priest from the order squeezed through the door to help. "Excuse me, no one is being beaten. We are not being beaten. But there is a real emergency here. I will contact your superiors later to explain." The priest actually knew one of the brand's executives from a past spiritual cleansing he had performed, which made the host hesitate. He didn't want to offend the religious community, but others in the crowd didn't care. "If there's an emergency, why haven't you called the police? We have an officer with us right here." The priest hesitated. He wanted to say they were fighting a ghost, but he knew no one would believe him, and it would only cause more chaos. The host tried to mediate. "Everyone, let's go back for now. I'll talk to him." The crowd stopped trying to push through but refused to leave, standing on the stairs. "Fine, you talk then." The priest and the young monk breathed a sigh of relief as long as the crowd didn't force their way in. But inside, the others looked on in horror. Serafina, even with the matriarch and Basil pinning her down, was twisting her body in an unnatural serpentine way, crawling towards the stairwell. The matriarch was shocked. Her claws were embedded in Serafina's bones, yet she could still move. Serafina had endured ages of torment in the underworld. Her willpower was immense. As she crawled, her dark energy flowed from her like a black tide, seeping towards the door. Her own form grew more translucent as she hummed her haunting tune. The spiritualists saw her desperate frenzy and realized she was trying to drag a group of mortals down with her. They began to panic. This dark energy, if a normal person touches it, they'll lose a limb at best. Should we all rush out and try to drive them away? There are too many of them, we can't control them all, and they won't believe the truth. If only the messenger could scare them away, but that might cause a stampede in the dark. These spiritual leaders might have some standing in their own communities, but to the general public, especially the young people outside, they were strangers. No one would listen to them. Even a great master would be helpless in this situation. Serafina was almost at the door. Everyone looked at the matriarch. In this crisis, only a fox spirit's power of illusion could peacefully and orderly guide the crowd away. Or a master of suggestion. But there was no such master here, and the matriarch seemed to be using all her strength just to hold Serafina down. A complex, detached smile played on Serafina's lips. A sense of dread filled the room. The great catastrophe centuries ago had also claimed thousands of innocent lives. Was history doomed to repeat itself? A priest declared, "Brothers and sisters, let's charge out there. We'll save who we can." The others roared in agreement. They were people of faith. They were prepared for this. Just then, the door was pulled open. It was the messenger's body. Caleb, who had been cheering on the matriarch just moments before, had somehow returned to his body and, while everyone was deliberating, had run to the door. He had the same idea as them. Save who you can. Even a stampede was better than everyone being consumed by dark energy. The others moved towards the wall to follow him. They saw Serafina's dark energy pooling at the doorway, yet the messenger's tone was surprisingly calm. He stood with his back to them and pulled off the object covering his face. "I think the third floor is a better place to be. Could everyone please turn around and proceed in an orderly fashion back to the third floor to take your seats? Until the power comes back on, I'll give everyone a personal autograph." Who would listen to such a strange request? Why should they care what he thought? And what was this about autographs? The next moment, a thunderous cheer erupted from the crowd outside. Then, without any illusion or suggestion, every single person, including the host, turned and quickly but orderly retreated back up to the third floor, their curiosity about the second floor instantly forgotten. Serafina's face was a mask of confusion. The matriarch let out a cold laugh. Well, that's one way to do it. You forced our messenger to drop his cover." Just then, two more familiars scrambled through the window. It was Vixen and Ermin, arriving late. Ermin saw the crowd of people and immediately turned his back, muttering sadly, "He lied to me again." Caleb hadn't known so many people would be involved when he sent the distress signal. "You're not used to being lied to yet? Let's go." Vixen leaped onto Serafina's back, planting her paws on her head. "So you're the one fighting our master? You don't look so tough." Serafina, who was about to speak, had the words forced back down her throat by Vixen's foot. If only Vixen had arrived a little earlier, she wouldn't be so smug. Serafina was already nearly subdued by the matriarch and Basil. With Vixen's help, the balance tipped completely. But what bothered her more was the question. Why had those people listened to the collector so readily? What was he in the mortal world? A master of suggestion? By this time, Caleb was gone. After he opened the door and spoke, he didn't linger. He had to manage his fans. He joined the stream of people heading back to the third floor, walking quickly without looking back. The fans became even more orderly, careful not to crowd him. They didn't find his request strange at all. A moment ago, they had all thought going to the second floor was a good idea. Now, they were all thinking how romantic their idol was, signing autographs in the dark on the third floor. How atmospheric. Some fans who were further away called out to him in the dark. "Caleb, what were you doing downstairs? Are you really preparing for the role of Brother Marcus by consulting with monks?" Caleb had been trying to think of an excuse, that he was just exploring or something. But his fans had already provided the perfect one for him. Caleb replied evasively, I can't talk about that." But his tone was a clear confirmation. The host joked, "Exclusive news. We get it, we won't say a word." Right, we all understand." The fans were even more reluctant to leave his side, surrounding him as they went upstairs. Caleb went up, but Julian remained behind. He was about to follow when a priest called out to him. Why did all those people listen to the messenger like that?" Julian looked at them strangely. Even though Caleb hadn't turned around, hadn't they heard what the fans were calling him? "Yes, we heard. They called him Caleb." But Caleb's fans loved inside jokes and often called him by that name in a theatrical way, which made the priests uncertain. They were already confused. "So, you mean, he really is?" The priest stammered, swallowing hard before finally getting the words out. "The celebrity from upstairs?" Julian just smiled and walked away. But his silence was confirmation enough. The truth was clear. Looking back, all the pieces fell into place. All the strange events and evidence now pointed to this one conclusion. The recent phenomenon of several elders in their orders suddenly becoming his fans. The time Father Michael and the young monk bowed to him and called it a misunderstanding. The rumors that this actor, Caleb, was exceptionally good at playing death scenes. The so-called unbeliever was the biggest lie of all. To think the messenger himself had been right under their noses all this time. They saw his work, his news, some had even seen his movies. Yet they had been blind, unable to see past their preconceptions. They had never imagined that the great collector and the famous celebrity were one and the same. A priest exclaimed, "All that talk about him being a disfigured car crash victim. It was because he's a celebrity." Serafina struggled to lift her head, forcing the words out through clenched teeth, a resentful tone in her voice. "What? Is a celebrity?" Vixen pulled the file containing Old Bill from Serafina's robes and said proudly, "It means he's a person of great influence in the mortal world. Everyone loves him." Basil added, especially his boyfriend. Flashes of light illuminated the darkness as Caleb used several phone flashlights to sign autographs at a table. Or rather, he and Julian were signing together. Caleb was using his special happy paper. He had Julian write the word light on the back of each sheet before he added his own signature. It wasn't just to get the fans to leave. The nocturne hadn't ended yet, and he didn't know if Serafina had been vanquished. A protective sigil, a symbol of light, would keep his dear fans safe from the lingering chaotic energy. And since it had his signature on it, they wouldn't throw it away. Those who didn't know would see it as just a word. Those who did, well, his cover was already blown, so what did it matter? His secret identity was becoming thinner and thinner. He was really only fooling his fans at this point. The fans were a bit curious. Where did Caleb get so many sheets of notebook paper? And why did he have his teacher? So he was here too, the julep ship was real. Write a word on it first. When they asked, Caleb just said, "Julian has beautiful handwriting. I wanted you all to appreciate it." A girl waiting in line for her autograph couldn't help but say, "You're force-feeding us this ship." Caleb replied weakly, "Don't talk to me about force." The fans laughed, thinking he was just joking about the constant shipping from his fans. Only Caleb knew that his lips were still tingling, happily clutching their autographs. Some fans noticed that the chill they had been feeling had dissipated. Perhaps it was the excitement of seeing their idol, but holding the signed paper, they felt a pleasant warmth. Caleb had brought a lot of happy paper, but he had used some of it earlier, and there were many people here. The stack of paper was dwindling. He was considering using regular paper when Officer Leo Wong reached the front of the line. A staff member recognized him and introduced him. "Caleb, this is Lily, the artist we invited. You've retweeted his comics before." Caleb froze. He was holding the last sheet of happy paper, his mind racing. He answered almost automatically, "Yes, I remember." Leo, in turn, was staring at the paper in Caleb's hand, and at the identical sheets in the hands of the other fans. He looked from the paper to Caleb, especially his eyes, and then his build. Leo was not like the others. He was a cop. He didn't believe in so many coincidences. He had thought before that this celebrity's eyes looked a bit like his partner's. Now, seeing that stack of happy paper, his detective instincts kicked in. Staring at Caleb in person, he came to a shocking conclusion. Caleb was his partner from the other side. He didn't know how he did it, being alive one moment and a spirit the next, but it was definitely him. Leo's intense stare was interpreted by others as the joy of a fan finally meeting his idol. After a long moment, Leo slowly held out his notebook. "Need more?" Caleb numbly took the notebook. "I was just running out. When you have no secrets left to keep, you become shameless." Caleb was numb to it all. "It really is you." The agent, oblivious, didn't notice the city police department logo on the notebook cover in the dim light. "Huh? Your paper seems to be the same brand." "Haha, what a coincidence." Caleb laughed dryly. "Yeah, a bit of a coincidence." With Leo's resupply of happy paper, Caleb was able to give an autograph to every fan. A few of them were extra special, bearing not only Caleb's signature and Julian's calligraphy, but also a quick sketch by Leo. The fans who received these treasured them. This is a masterpiece of the three perfections: poetry, calligraphy, and painting. "Poetry?" Caleb asked. The calligraphy and painting were there, but where did the poetry come from? A fan gushed, "Your name, Caleb, is the shortest and most beautiful poem." Just then, the lights on the third floor finally came back on, bathing the room in bright light. The crowd cheered, thrilled to finally see their favorite actor in a well-lit environment. The media, who had been frustrated by the delay, now had a great story. Not only had Caleb confirmed he had taken the role of Brother Marcus, but he had also been consulting with monks for it. The brand representatives were also thrilled. The event, though delayed, had been a huge success for everyone. After the event, Caleb went to a private lounge, bringing Leo with him under the pretext of chatting about art. The fans, thinking he was just showing his appreciation for a talented artist, looked on with envy. The agent was busy wrapping things up with the brand, leaving Caleb, Julian, and Leo alone in the room. Leo was still trying to process everything. "I'm still having a hard time believing it. You're really my partner." He was, by extension, connected to the entertainment industry now. Caleb sighed. "It's a long story. It's my part-time job." "I never thought a celebrity would have a part-time job," Leo said. Caleb laughed and gave him a brief explanation of what being a collector entailed, that it wasn't something he could just quit. Julian took Caleb's right hand. "How is it?" "Ouch." "A little sore," Caleb admitted. His hand had been frozen by the dark energy earlier, and then he had signed so many autographs, many with personal messages. His hand was definitely feeling it. Julian gently massaged his hand, from the wrist to the base of his thumb, then kneading his fingertips. The sight of their three hands intertwined, their long fingers gently rubbing, made Leo look away, feeling strangely embarrassed. This Julian was even more attentive than the news portrayed him. No wonder people shipped them. There was definitely something there. "So what were you really doing on the second floor?" Leo asked, curious. "You probably already figured it out. There was a ghost down there." "I was trying to save Old Bill," Caleb explained, briefly summarizing the story of the Nocturne and Old Bill's capture. That was why they couldn't let anyone go down there. It was all over now. He had received a message. Leo asked if he was going down there now. He wanted to see it for himself. He couldn't believe his partner's partner had such a dramatic love life. My partner's partner. Caleb didn't know how to respond to that. He suspected Leo just wanted to gloat. "I'm planning on going down now," Caleb said. Leo thought about the crowd outside. "Now? But the fans haven't left yet. If you go now, they'll follow you." Before, Caleb had been in control, but now that he was leaving, some fans might not be so obedient. If they followed him, he wouldn't be able to get anything done. But Caleb was calm. "It's fine. I'll go in spirit." Caleb texted his agent that he was going to take a short nap. He told Leo he would lock the door and to go out first. Leo stepped outside, and Caleb closed the door. A moment later, he and Julian emerged in their spectral forms. Leo marveled at it. No wonder the paparazzi and fans could never catch Caleb in his daily life. You'd need some special experience to even encounter him. And even if you did, you probably wouldn't recognize him. In his spirit form, Caleb put on his mask. Even though his identity had been compromised, it was a habit. And he still had to be careful around others. In this form, with not even his eyes showing, even his most dedicated fans would be stumped. Caleb led Leo down to the second floor. Two priests were still standing guard at the door. They looked at him with a strange expression. "Open up. This is my friend," Caleb said. He had finished his event upstairs, and the situation down here had been dealt with. Serafina had been trapped in her own file by the matriarch, who was now sitting on the windowsill, holding the file and looking out at the sky. The nocturne had not yet ended. Grimm and Silas were still missing. Some of the spiritualists had already left, the injured to seek medical attention, others to help find Grimm and Silas. Basil was also injured. He hadn't been hurt in years and couldn't stop touching the wound on his neck, his long forked tongue darting out to lick it. Ermin was trying to treat him, but Basil's constant fidgeting was making it impossible. Ermin looked like he wanted to die just to avoid having to communicate with him. Vixen was tending to old Bill, who was lying on the floor, muttering fragments of words like dad and money. When he saw Leo, he immediately sat up straight. Caleb asked, "Is that sanitary? Licking it like that?" When they had fought Basil before, just touching him was enough to get poisoned. So, if a venomous snake bit or licked itself, would it be poisoned or would it heal faster? Basil hissed, his tongue flicking in the air, clearly in a bad mood. Ermin, who was sitting next to him, dodged just in time to avoid being licked. Vixen watched with trepidation. This was why she hadn't wanted to treat Basil. What if his tongue flicked out and hit her? Only Ermin had a natural resistance to venom. But while he was resistant to venom, he was not resistant to social interaction. Ermin looked like he was about to cry, staring pleadingly at Caleb. Caleb said, "Basil, let him finish treating you. Stop moving." Basil argued, "It's uncomfortable. I can't help it." Ermin, looking at a corner of the wall, said, "You can't lick it. You really can't." Caleb thought for a moment. "Wait here. I'll go to a vet's office and get one of those cones. You won't be able to lick it then." The familiars had no idea what an Elizabethan collar was. Leo found Basil quite terrifying. Caleb reassured him, "It's okay. He's on our side. You've met Vixen before. You've heard of the 4 great familiars, right?" As a local, Leo had, of course, heard stories from his elders about them. "Are they your familiars?" he asked, enlightened. "This is a fox spirit, and that must be a serpent spirit. You can tell by the tongue." He looked at Ermin with interest. "And he must be a stoat spirit." Caleb nodded. Leo then looked at the aloof matriarch. "And she must be the weasel spirit." "Don't you dare." Caleb quickly stepped in front of the matriarch to stop her from attacking. The matriarch's beautiful face contorted into a fox-like snarl, her fangs bared. "You dare call me a weasel?" Fox spirits were notoriously proud. They looked down on weasel spirits, as well as stoat spirits and serpent spirits. In their eyes, they were all inferior. Leo was startled. "No? My apologies. There are 4 of you, and I've heard the stories of the fox, weasel, stoat, and serpent, so I just assumed it was one of each." The logic, though flawed, was hard to argue with. Even the matriarch slowly lowered her hand. "What, you think it makes sense too?" Leo asked, puzzled, "So why are there 2 fox spirits and no weasel spirit?" Caleb laughed. "Who made that rule? Do I have to collect the whole set?" Leo muttered, "It just sounds a bit off." doesn't it? The messenger has 4 great familiars: fox, fox, stoat, and serpent. The matriarch said coolly, just think of Vixen as the weasel. She's just as sneaky and opportunistic. Vixen, feeling the vibrations of the conversation, slowly lowered her head. Old Bill had started to laugh weakly, coughing as he did. He knew there would be drama. From the moment Caleb had re-entered the room, the spiritualists who now knew the truth had been staring at him. Their phones had all died from the cold earlier, so they were now clustered around the power outlets like small animals, their heads turning in unison to follow Caleb's movements. Even though they had heard the truth and had just seen the news photos confirming his identity, it still felt unreal. They watched him talk with his companion and his familiars. Finally, a priest from the Order of the Morning Star timidly called out, "Messenger." Caleb turned. "Yes?" The group exchanged excited glances. Caleb sighed. "Yes." A priest who had interacted with him a lot and had fed him many times before mustered the courage to ask, "Your cover is blown. Why are you still wearing the mask?" Caleb laughed. His laughter broke the tension, and the other spiritualists felt relaxed enough to join in the teasing. They never would have thought that the fearsome messenger was actually a handsome young actor with charming dimples. Exactly. The messenger revealed his face for his fans. Keeping it hidden now is pointless. If you had used this face from the beginning, who knows how many people would have willingly let you reap their souls. Though it's a bit lacking in authority. Fine, I'll take it off. It's pointless now anyway, Caleb said with a grin. But why should I? You want a free look at a celebrity? If you want to see my face, buy a ticket. The messenger was still the messenger. His cover may have been blown, but they still couldn't get the better of him in a verbal spar. They were left speechless. Defeated, they turned to teasing each other instead. Next time the messenger's movie comes out,